Knock her out.
Yes, sir.
I mean it. Knock her out.
Yes, sir.
And that goes for any of the rest of you.
Amanda Householder, thanks so much for coming on to Talk Beliefs from your home in California. Now, I met you through your YouTube channel and TikTok account, which are there to spread awareness about abuses within the Circle of Hope boarding school and other facilities like it. This will be part of my series on religious reform schools, or the so-called troubled teen industry. And unlike survivors I've interviewed before, you are unique in that it was your parents that were actually in charge of this facility. So how are you doing, Amanda? Hopefully your social media and GoFundMe campaign are raising a lot of awareness about these institutions. What has the response been like?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on this show. The response has been, honestly, mostly positive. The GoFundMe has raised enough to file for our 501c3, and we filed for those about 2 weeks ago. I'm going to go check my mail today to see if we got the stuff in. Thankfully, we have the organization almost up and running, but TikTok and YouTube and Facebook has been mostly positive, to be honest. There's been a few people here and there that will come on and say things like, oh, you can't trust them because they were troubled teens and stuff like that. But the majority has been overwhelmingly positive and nice. So that's been good.
Okay, before we go into detail about the Circle of Hope School and what went on there, let's just start at the beginning. Your dad was born into a religious family, but it wasn't until he met your mom that the fundamentalism really started, right?
Correct. I want to say he met my mom either in 89 or 90. And at that time, he was going to church, but he wasn't religiously going to church. But he met my mom, and I want to say when I was I think it was two. My mom started listening to Jesus music because my older brother, who's 2 years older than me, he was all like, Mommy, I want to listen to Jesus music. I want to listen to Jesus music. And so that in turn started my mom listening to the Christian radio, which got my mom begging my dad to take us to church. But then my dad he didn't want to go. He would come up with, oh, well, they don't have good clothes because, Sunday best, you have to wear your best clothes. So you'd be like, oh, they don't have church clothes. They don't have church shoes. But eventually my mom convinced him enough. And so they started attending the church. I don't know if it was the church my dad attended as a child, but I know it was the church that his parents were attending, Rosedale Baptist Church in Winchester, Virginia. So we started attending that church, and we were already being spanked and stuff like that. But that was basically when they started throwing the religion into it. Oh, you're getting a spanking because of this. So we would be spanked, and then they would read the Bible with us and pray with us and tell us why we got spanked. But they would use the Bible against us. So after they started going to church, we just got religiously abused as well, if that makes sense.
Well, your parents cut their teeth on working in a children's home environment early on when they joined the Faith Children's Home. And after that, the Agape boarding school for boys. Living and working in those facilities turned out to be a dress rehearsal for things to come, wouldn't you say?
They took a lot of what they learned from the first school and the second school, but mainly the second school. And so extreme workouts, they would make girls walk around like ducks and quack like ducks. But it was things like that they took and adapted from Agape. So Agape had this thing called bunny fufu. So my dad took it and changed it into the duck walk, basically. And then Agape did restraining as well. And my dad does restraining where it's basically my dad would take, I can't speak on Agape because at Agape they had a restraining room. And so they would take those boys up into that room, and I would only see those boys come back bloodied and bruised. Whereas at Circle of Hope, I was part of the restraining because my dad he would pick the girls up and like by either by the back of the neck or the front of the neck and make them get onto the ground, like literally pick them up and slam them. And then he would call myself and other teenage girls over, and we would have to put our pressure on their pressure points. So as hard as we could. I remember being yelled at because I wasn't putting enough pressure, and my arms and wrists were already hurting during that time. So like, I'm being yelled at, if you're not going to press hard enough, it's going to be your turn next. The other girls are getting the same thing. So we are being intimidated into doing this restraining on a girl, and my dad would be putting his knees on her head. And this would go on for hours. This wasn't something that was just like 10 minutes. It was something that would happen for hours. I remember there was a set of sisters, and they were restrained side by side, and I would say an hour and a half. And it's weird because afterwards, my parents, I wouldn't say they like got off on it, but they would kiss and hug and like be kinder to each other after they had just done what they did to a girl, or after like they beat myself or my siblings. Like it was different. Like they got like more lovey towards each other. And that's what I find really interesting. Just more thinking about it is like before the religion came into it, it was not like that from what I remember. It wasn't. They were beating on each other. Like my dad, I remember my dad pushing my mom out of a car at one point. I was like 3, and I remember the library we were in front of and everything. And I remember my dad pushing my mom out of the moving car. So like after they became religious, it turned from them to being on us. And then they opened the school, and it turned into the girls, like the girls being abused.
Well, eventually your father wanted to open his own boarding school, specifically a religious boarding school for girls. It was branded Circle of Hope, but things weren't exactly hopeful once the facility got going, were they?
Absolutely not. In the beginning, it was okay. But I would say about 2 months into it, they started getting more strict. So in the beginning, they had a trampoline. Myself and we started with 3 girls. So myself and the 3 girls would literally just sit on the trampoline after we did all of our chores, or we would jump on the trampoline. We would have fun, you know. But eventually it got to the point where I want to say they got overwhelmed with the amount of girls they had, because one of the girls, at one point, I was in charge of the kitchen, but I was too young to realize that I should be keeping an eye on the girls' food and that they're actually eating it and not like throwing it away. But it was found out that this one girl literally was only eating pickles with mustard on it. And so she lost a lot of weight. She was, I want to say 5'8", and a bigger, like not chunky, but she, when we got her, she was not overweight at all. So when she lost the weight, it was so gradual that you couldn't really tell. At least I couldn't really tell as a teenager until it got to the point of her bones being seen. And that's when my parents started implementing like double portions, triple portions, making girls eat so much until they barf, and then forcing them to eat that barf. But they started doing the restraining, the extreme workouts. They were making girls drink pitchers of water, like 2 pitchers of, like, you know, when you go to a restaurant, it might be different over in England, but the little size, like just the little 2-pint pitchers, you know, like really small pitchers that they like come and fill your water or tea up in. Yeah. They would make them chug those, and then they would have to run around laps. And I'm not sure if you saw the aerial footage of Circle of Hope, but there's a pin, and that's the pin that they would have to run laps until it equaled a mile after chugging 2 gallons of water, or 2 pitchers of water. And then they would have to come inside, and then they would eat peanut butter and oatmeal, and that was their meal. And that was usually you could get punished for anything like that, but if you were heavy set or overweight, in my dad's eyes, that's what you did to lose weight. So and I want to say August, I can't remember exactly, but 2 months after they opened, me and 2 girls were kind of sick of everything that they were doing. And one of the girls came to me, and she was telling me that my dad was sexually touching her. And so that day, basically, me, her, and another girl decided, oh, well, we're going to run away. So we took trash bags and started filling the trash bags up. I went and stayed with a cousin of my mom's for a couple of months. I babysat her kids. And while I was there, she paid me. So I bought some pants that I wasn't supposed to have, but I bought some pants and I snuck them home and I had them hidden. So we like threw the pants in there. We threw some CDs I wasn't supposed to have. A whole bunch of stuff, and then we climbed out my window and walked until one of the people because I had a cell phone, I called someone that I had met at a place I was working, and the girl I ran away with, she told him basically everything that was happening, and his dad said, yeah, you can take them to Kansas City. Well, we ended up in New Mexico, not just Kansas City, but that was basically because of how strict it started getting, and because my dad was sexually molesting this one girl. But I eventually ended up getting brought back home, and when I got back home, more rules were put in place, obviously, but I was treated as a student, and that was the first time and only time I was ever actually put into an orange shirt and made to stand on the wall.
Well, eventually your doubts about your family's beliefs led you to do a lot of research into other beliefs and cults, and this really opened your eyes, didn't it?
Yeah, it did actually. I can't remember exactly what it was that got me into looking into YouTube videos, but somehow, actually your channel was one of the first ones, and I thought it was a Mormon video, but actually when I went back and looked, it was a Jehovah Witness video. And I remember exactly why I started watching your videos was because we had a girl whose mom was practicing Jehovah Witness, and my dad, I don't know because I was never raised in that, so I can't speak on that, but I'm just going to say what my dad told her. So my dad would tell her, oh, there's this thing called the Watchtower, and they would lock people up in the Watchtower, and your mom's evil, and they're going to lock your mom up in the Watchtower if she comes to Christianity and things like that. What I knew on religion was what I was taught. And so when I started reaching out and branching out and watching YouTubes, like I said, your channel was one of the first ones. I forget all the other ones, but it would just go down. I went to, right after one of your videos, it went to a Waco, Texas video, and it started talking about Waco. And I was just sitting there and I was like, oh, Mormonism's so bad because that's just what I was taught. And then I'm like listening to it and I'm like, wait, this sounds, minus the polygamy, like the openness about polygamy or, pedophilia. I was like, it sounds so much like the way I was raised, except the way I was raised, our pastors like hid things under the table. Like if they found out someone was molesting a child in the church, they would hide it. Or if the pastor was molesting someone in the church would hide it. And it wasn't something that was like, oh, this is God's will or anything like that. But I was just sitting there and I'm just like, this sounds so much like how I was raised. And then it just got, I don't know, just from there, it just, started me on like a whole bunch of different YouTube videos and realizing that I was raised really wrong. So.
At one point, you decided to blow the whistle on your parents' school and you approached the various churches that supported Circle of Hope. So how did that go? Were they sympathetic?
Sometimes how it works is a church will see like a family is having issues with a girl, and they'll be like, oh, well, you need to send your daughter here. And so that's basically what happened with this family. And I can't remember if the church officially paid for her stay at Circle of Hope, but I know there have been churches that paid for girls to be at Circle of Hope. But she went to this church that sent her to Circle of Hope, and the pastor was like, oh yeah, send us my wife a message of everything that happened. And so she did on Facebook, and they basically blocked her and shunned her. But it's, to be honest, that, and I don't mean this, it's just not surprising because As like I said earlier, my dad was not extremely religious. He was trying his hardest to get away from religion. But at some point when he was in the military, when he was stationed in Paris Island, there was a church in Beaufort, South Carolina that he helped build, like the building he actually helped build. And so they have his picture on the wall. I think my brother Eric's picture's on the wall as well, if I remember correctly. And so it's not surprising because that church has supported my dad for a while, and they know of his military background. Like, he was awarded seven silver stars, but turned 5 back, so he only has 2. And so he does have a really good military history, and his military history should be respected. But I can see why these pastors would do that, but at the same time, it's like his military past has nothing. It's sad. It's like his past in the military cannot outshine the abuse he's doing now. But it seems like a lot of the churches just don't want to hear it. So I did try contacting the church that they are currently members of, Berean Baptist Church in Springfield, Missouri. And they, at one point, they wouldn't receive calls. Now they're making it to where if you call, they're like, oh, are you a member, or a current member, or wanting to be a member? And if you answer no to all of those, you don't get through. So I did give the deputy the pastor's phone number, and the deputy contacted the pastor, left a voicemail, and instead of the pastor contacting the deputy back, the pastor had his lawyer contact the deputy. And the lawyer basically said, you need to check your sources. And the deputy's like, well, these women are now women. They're not troubled teens anymore. They have absolutely no need to lie. They have families. Like, this is not something I think they're lying about. And the lawyer's like, oh, well, I can see this conversation's not going anywhere. And so basically hung up. I did go to another person who runs a different ranch in Missouri in 2018. And I asked him, because he witnessed the abuse my brother went through and I went through at Agape. And I asked him if he would speak out on my dad. And he basically told me no. And so, I don't know, I was kind of heartbroken there because I thought he would help. But he didn't, which was unfortunate. So basically, anyone that has been a religious figure or pastor that has been supportive of Circle of Hope has not been wanting to hear it, or will just, they just don't want to hear it.
Brush it under the carpet.
Basically, yeah.
Knock her out.
Yes, sir.
I mean it. Knock her out.
Yes, sir.
And that goes for any of the rest of you. If she clenches her fist like she's going to hit you, that's a threat. Knock her out.
Yes, sir.
You got that, Ashlyn?
Yes, sir.
And are you being...
Amanda, you're doing a lot to spread the word about these abusive schools, and a lot of people have come forward after seeing your videos. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Back in March, I got a message from a guy who went to Agape telling me he needed to speak to me about my dad. I honestly thought he was going to tell me my dad was dead, which I know this may sound morbid, but I've been trying to get them exposed for so long. I was like, I guess I'm just going to have to wait until he dies. And so I messaged him back and I was like, well, is my dad dead? And he's like, no. He's like, it's something worse. And I was like, is it about the school? And he said, yes. And so he called me and he's like, I got this video. He's like, explaining to me what the video is about. And I was like, okay. Before I even saw the video, I was like, let me guess, my mom's in the background, just all like not laughing, but just lounging around like nothing's happening. And he's like, yes, exactly. And so he sent me the video and I watched it and I was like, I knew exactly what that video showed before I even watched it, which is kind of weird because I don't know. It was just my life, my whole life. That's what it was like. So I knew what it was going to be. And I posted it after I sat on it for a while. I posted it. And all the girls that have been coming forward now were like, I could have lived my whole life without hearing that voice again. I was like, yeah. I was like, I had to sit on the video for a couple of days because just hearing my dad's voice sent me back into like a little girl again. And But at the same time, it also empowered me, because I was like, now no one can tell me that this is not how I was raised, because I had gone to people before. I had been like the pastor that they're currently at the church of. I went to a lady and she went to him, and I got beaten for it. And I at this point in time, I was like, well, now no one can take my truth away. And so I posted it on Facebook. The video got about 4,000 views. Nowhere really that it should like how I felt it should have, because literally it's a owner of a religious school telling 37 or 36 girls to knock one 13-year-old girl out. And then but the video did get me in contact with other survivors of troubled teen industries, and one of them, her name is Miranda, and she's from the Talk Troubled podcast, and she's honestly been like one of my biggest support systems since. She messaged me April 29th, 2020. A boy named Cornelius Frederick was restrained at his he was a foster kid put into a sequel facility called Lakeside Academy in Kalamazoo. Yep. And he was restrained, and 2 days later he lost his life due to the injuries from the restraint. And so she sent me that video, and basically I just lost it, because my thought was I could have been the one doing, like, my dad could have been forcing me to restrain him, and he could have been he could have died that way. Or it could have been any other student being forced to do that to another student. And so Miranda's like, you need to get a TikTok. You need to get a TikTok. And I was like, I don't really want to get a TikTok, because, you know, I didn't feel like I could put music appropriately to like abuse stories or dance to abuse stories. And she's like, no, just go check out TikTok. And so like I checked out TikTok, and I was like, oh, okay. And so my first video I did was the girls being told to knock my dad out. But then the second video I put together is actually the one that took off, and it was a put a finger down challenge. And I basically just did it like my father runs a cult. But since then, honestly, it's taken off, and people have been, we have a petition. I think it's almost up to 300,000 signatures. People have been super supportive, and I honestly, it just blows my mind away how supportive they've been.
Growing up, you were not allowed to watch TV because it was considered evil and you'd burn in hell for eternity. You were not allowed to listen to the radio because it was considered evil and you'd burn in hell for eternity. You were not allowed to read any book except the Bible because they were considered evil and you'd burn in hell for eternity. You were not allowed to wear pants as a female because you would burn in hell for eternity. If you ever suffered extreme abuse due to spare the rod, spoiled a child. If you were ever starved as a punishment. If you ever watched your father pick up a disabled child by the neck and slam her to the ground to restrain her. If you were ever told to restrain one of your peers, if you didn't, you would be restrained instead. If you ever watched your father force another child to eat their vomit, if your father runs a cult.
You also have a GoFundMe campaign. What can you tell the viewers about that?
Basically, we want to be able to help people in the future get therapy if they need. I actually did just have a friend who took his own life from agape, and just a couple of days ago. And that's my goal, is to be able to, I know I can't end that, but my goal is to be able to help. If you need help, get therapy, because I know it's really hard. And as a survivor, a lot of our friends are no longer here because they can no longer take care. They can no longer deal with the pain of what they went through. And I just want to be able to help ease that for future survivors that leave. So the GoFundMe is going to be going mainly towards, we're going to have it go towards our organization, but our organization is going to open the Joe Barnett Fund, and that's going to go through mental health therapy and funds. And then we want to be able to help because homelessness is a huge issue within the troubled teen industry. A lot of kids, like at my parents' school, there's been a lot of girls that have gone homeless because they have absolutely nowhere to go because my parents ruined the relationship between them and their parents. And so I want to be able to help them get into an apartment or a hotel room until they can get a job and get on their feet till they can get an apartment. And then lawyer fees as well, because we need to get this ended. Like no other child should have to go through what we went through. And so
absolutely. Okay, that was a really heartbreaking story, and I must applaud you yet again for all your hard work and activism. I know there will be people watching who have perhaps been to similar reform schools or behavioral modification camps and who can definitely relate. I'll leave links to your YouTube channel, TikTok account, and GoFundMe campaign in the description below. And all that's left to say is thank you so much, Amanda, for coming on to Talk Beliefs.
And thank you so much for letting me share and spread our stories.